Sobriety is one of the best decisions you can make for your life, 100%, if alcohol has become something that has started to take you down a negative path. And sobriety is incredibly hard, incredibly hard. It changes your routine. It exposes emotions. It brings up patterns that you didn't even know were there. And when we pretend that recovery is supposed to be immediate, simple, just like a decision you make and then you're just on the other side, people will feel like they're failing when it gets messy. But the mess is part of the process. Hello and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today I'm going to talk about the connection between traditional sobriety from alcohol and how that impacts your dynamics with food, because in my decade and a half of working with people in this realm, I can't tell you how many people have had overlap between these two relationships. Okay, so let's start with sobriety from alcohol. So what happens is you stop drinking, you do the hard thing, the amazing thing, the courageous thing, you commit to change, and then a few weeks or months go by and something new starts happening. You find yourself standing in your house, in your kitchen, wherever, the garage, your car, and you're just compulsively eating things straight from the container, just feeling this like endless need for completion, right? To finish it. Whether that's ice cream, chips, cereal out of the box. And again, it's not a hunger thing. It's just because you are in the situation where you don't know what to do with yourself. You don't know what to do with yourself. And suddenly food becomes this whole thing, right? It becomes this bigger thing in your brain. You're thinking about it more. You're eating more when you're stressed out or when you have anxiety, when there's edginess around. You're noticing this pull maybe towards food that you didn't have before, right? That wasn't there like half a year ago or whatever the timeline is for you. And you find yourself thinking, what is happening to me? You're like, what? Like, what is happening to me? Why am I suddenly obsessed with this? And it's just interesting to think about it, because when we talk about getting sober, the vibe around it, the narrative around it, which is completely a truthful narrative, is that life gets better. And in many ways, life 100% does get better, right? There's much more clarity. There's much more focus. There's the ability to be more present, for sure. 100% life gets better, but there's a certain type of experience that I don't think people are often prepared for, which is when your primary coping mechanism is taken away, the one that was covering up some sort of experience, lived emotional experience, a need or something. The need doesn't just disappear. The nervous system just starts looking for somewhere else to put it, to put that energy, to put that emotion, to put that lived experience. And for a lot of people, that somewhere is food. Okay, so I'm going to talk more about this, but before I do, I want to introduce myself to you. If you have never been here before, my name is Alana Kessler. I am a functional and registered dietitian. I have been in this health, this wellness, mindfulness space for 20 plus years. I've worked in so many different arenas in the wellness space, clinically, holistically. I've done so many things, but my passion, especially over the last decade and a half, is really helping people to find love with their body, lose weight if that's a goal, reconnect with yourself, overcome any kind of emotional or addictive dynamics, relationships with food, with your body, really just live your best life, right? Create the conditions within yourself so that you can live your best life. So if you are new here, welcome. If you are a longtime listener, welcome back, and let's dive in. Okay, so in recovery spaces, I think it's important to acknowledge, and we're talking specifically about recovering from alcohol and making this connection today. So I think it's important to just acknowledge that sobriety isn't just about removing the substance of alcohol. It's not just about substance removal. It's about removing a tool. The alcohol was doing something for you. It helped you relax after work. It helped you turn off your brain at night or anytime, right? It helped you numb feelings that maybe you didn't even know you had or didn't know how to sit with, right? It kind of just was this nerve blocker for things. It made social situations easier potentially. How many times do we go somewhere? Do we go to a bar? Or we just go to a party and we immediately have this ritual of alcohol, right? Of having it. And it kind of makes us land in the space almost. So whatever role it played, it served a function. And when you take that away, the function it served, the need it was supporting, it doesn't just disappear, right? It's still there. The stress, the anxiety, whatever emotional intensity that you felt that the alcohol was helping to dissolve is still there. But now you are not utilizing alcohol anymore. You're not using it to manage. So your brain does what brains are designed to do, which is look for another form of relief, and food is right there, right? A really good option. And there's a few reasons why food becomes the substitute for a lot of people. And first, there's the neurological one, okay? And the biochemical one. Alcohol and highly palatable foods, things that are high in sugar, fat, salt, they activate similar reward pathways in the brain. They both release dopamine. Okay, and we know dopamine is like the happy hormone. It's connected to serotonin, which creates this calm feeling. So when alcohol disappears, your brain naturally looks for other ways to recreate that feeling of relief, calm, or pleasure. And food becomes like one of the fastest ways to access it because of all of its sensations, different flavors. Our tongues have different flavor sensors. Our tongue is actually it's almost like a vehicle. So it's just interesting to think about it that way. And there's another reason as well that food becomes the go-to is that food is safe. Like literally, it's legal, right? Food is like, it's safe, it's legal, it's socially acceptable. It's less taboo than alcohol. So when you get sober from alcohol, it's like, you cannot have that anymore. There's a line in the sand. You're either sober or you're not sober. Maybe there's 2% of people that they don't define it that way with alcohol, but the 98% of people I know define it that way with alcohol. You've made the decision, you're not drinking anymore. It's black and white. People are watching you. They're going to know if you did it. There are stakes when it comes to alcohol. But nobody stages an intervention if you eat a whole pizza. Nobody questions you for having too much dessert. So food becomes a way to soothe yourself, to distract yourself, to move energy around your body that needs to be moved, to ground yourself without the same level of scrutiny that alcohol has. And not necessarily because it's healthier, but because it's literally the safest one available. Okay, but the part that blindsides people is this. You go into sobriety expecting the challenge to be resisting alcohol, right? Like we think the biggest thing is going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to just say no to alcohol. And that 100% is a challenge, right? That 100% is a challenge. But it's almost like humans have this thing where it's like when they commit to something and like we said before, it's a social contract almost. It's sometimes easier to stick to because you feel like the social contract is also helping you stick to it. But food doesn't really have the same social contract in that way, because months later, you are realizing that food is taking up a lot of your brain space. You're planning what you're going to eat, and not in like a fun, efficient way. It's in a way that isn't 100% in service of your best self. And now what alcohol used to do, food is doing. You're eating cold leftovers late at night, even though you're not hungry. And you're doing these things with the same kind of energy, in the same kind of way that feels uncomfortably familiar. And as someone who had an addictive relationship with food, we all know what that feels like. There's a certain energy that you apply when you are using food, the same way that you apply when you're using alcohol. And you can start to feel the same loss of control that you perhaps experience with drinking, which can be extremely terrifying because you worked so hard to get sober from alcohol, right? And now you're wondering, which is a good thing if the awareness is coming there, but you're wondering if you're just replacing one problem with another problem. But unfortunately, what a lot of people end up doing is they deal with it in isolation or with this internalized shame and secrecy, right? Or they try to control it with the loop of the restriction, and it starts to become something that you micromanage. The preoccupation doesn't really go away. The energy, the intense, urgent energy, and the hyper focus on making this experience with food and eating happen, similar to the way it was with drinking, starts to feel similar. Part of the reason this issue with food and this experience with food keeps happening is because we don't really understand what's going on underneath. So let's just lay out there what it actually feels like on the inside. Okay, so say you are sober from alcohol. You spend the whole day putting a lot of energy trying to stay sober because it definitely takes energy to change behaviors, right? It takes intentionality, it takes brain power, it takes these micro decisions that in the beginning feel more macro because you're making a big change. So you're managing a lot. You're managing emotions. You're holding yourself together. And so by the time the end of the day comes, a lot of times you're just fatigued. You're exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally. Your nervous system is totally fried. So you start eating. You go into your house, you throw your stuff down, and you start eating because it's grounding. And your mind is quiet for a few minutes. And it gives you something to, like I said, hyper focus on. It relaxes the emotional intensity that's been building all day. But then a lot of times the guilt comes, right? And the guilt comes now, whereas I don't know if guilt was necessarily there with the alcohol, but guilt comes now because you think to yourself, I should be better than this. I should have more control than this. I'm sober now. Like, I should be better. But then it keeps happening. And eventually the pattern does start to feel more compulsive, right? You start to think about food more in the day. You start to eat faster, right? Your actual eating gets quicker. Maybe you eat in secret. And underneath all of this is this kind of self-reflection of, am I just someone who can't handle life without being addicted to something, without numbing somehow, without having a substance to soothe and to focus on? This is the emotional piece. And talking about the emotional intensity and the fact that alcohol, one of its main jobs when it has become something that has elevated to the level of addiction, is that it turns down the intensity and the volume on feelings, right? It doesn't erase the feelings, but it dulls them. It makes them less sharp, feel less intense. It creates just like a softer environment. And so when you remove the alcohol, those emotions come rushing back. And they come back really loudly. And they're oftentimes really, they're muddied, right? They're muddied up. You can't quite maybe discern the difference between grief, regret, loneliness, anger, fear, right? And these are all different flavors of emotions. But when we've dulled them for so long, but now we're removing the nerve block and then we're allowing them to start to rise up from the ether, it's hard to really discern what emotion you're actually feeling and then how to properly support yourself to process that emotion. And if you've never learned how to process emotions, of course, the intensity is going to feel overwhelming. And of course, the survival part of your brain and nervous system is going to want another way to regulate that. And food becomes that. And that is not a weakness. It's just the way that your wiring is. And just deciding to become sober, it doesn't change the wiring right away. There's a decision, and then there's the integration of what that decision has caused in your body, mind, and nervous system. And that often can be the most challenging part, because now you are raw to it all.
You've built a good life. From the outside, it looks like you have it all together. You eat clean, you work hard, you take care of everyone. But there's this one area that still feels impossible to master, and that is food. You can eat perfectly all day and still end up in the kitchen at night wondering why you keep doing this. You promise yourself you'll start fresh tomorrow, and I know you mean it every single time. But the cycle, it always finds its way back, especially when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, or when you're just tired of being the one that's holding it all together. And I get it because I lived that way for years. And what I learned is this: the problem, it was never about food. It was the pressure underneath it, the perfectionism, the self-doubt, the part of me that never felt safe and secure to just be me. And that's why I created the sober eating sequence. It's a proven 3-phase method that rewires the emotional patterns and the belief systems driving overeating so you can relax, trust yourself around food, and release weight completely naturally, without force and without obsession. Because when your body feels secure, it lets go. The cravings quiet, the self-punishment, it softens, and food, it stops being the thing that you have to fix. This is not another plan. This isn't another rule book. It's a revolutionary transformation for your nervous system, for your body, and for your identity. So join the sober eating movement today.
And so sobriety does really change your identity in ways that you might not expect, right? For so many people, it can change who you are, even just as like a person in the world, a person with relationships, a person socially. A lot of people, alcohol is such a huge part of socialization. Mentioned it before, but it is almost like an accessory to some people's personalities. And it's woven into routines, into relationships, right? Happy hour with friends. It can be a certain date night ritual. It can be just like, it can signal the beginning of something. It can signal like a grounding experience. And so when that disappears, there is a big gap. And you can people start asking themselves, like, who am I now? And this is a really, that's a huge existential crisis, right? Like, who am I now? And while you're figuring that out, while you're in that gray area, that transition, food is 100% something that is familiar and comforting, that you can anchor yourself to, that gives you some of what the whole drinking experience perhaps gave you before. And I'm not just saying the liquid itself, I'm talking about like the experience of drinking. That's because when we're talking about food in this way, we're not just talking about the substance you're eating, but we're talking about how it becomes something that you think about. It becomes something that you plan, organize your life around while everything feels uncertain. So do you see the similarity? It's like it becomes a contextual thing as well for your life, because alcohol isn't just content that you consume. It does create the contextual fabric of your life as well. And so food starts to serve that same function. I think one of the hardest parts when we talk about sobriety from alcohol is the reality that we have to hold on to two truths at the same time. Sobriety is one of the best decisions you can make for your life, 100%, if alcohol has become something that has started to take you down a negative path. And sobriety is incredibly hard. Incredibly hard. It changes your routine. It exposes emotions. It brings up patterns that you didn't even know were there. Both of these things are true, right? It can be an amazingly courageous and amazing decision, and it could be these things as well. And we don't talk about the second truth enough. We don't. And when we pretend that recovery is supposed to be immediate, simple, just like a decision you make and then cold turkey, and you're just on the other side, right? It's like we made a decision and now we are that sober person, with only the positive elements of it. If that's how we position it, people will feel like they're failing when it gets messy. But the mess is part of the process, right? You have to build yourself from the not sober person, the person who decided to be sober, and then you have to build the identity of the sober person. And the road to that identity building can be messy. I mean, it is messy. Experiences like this often reveal something even much bigger than this, that most people were never actually taught how to cope with life, whether maybe we were overprotected, or maybe we were told how to perform, or maybe we were told that we need to be productive, how to look like we have it together. Maybe we weren't taught how to feel our feelings and like let that be okay, and how to self-regulate, how to process difficult emotions, right? Sit with discomfort physically, discomfort emotionally, without needing to like jump out of our skin. As humans, we found coping strategies. For some people, that strategy is alcohol. For others, it's food. For others, it's even more socially acceptable ones like work, control, efficiency, perfectionism, or distraction, right? But none of these behaviors come out of nowhere. They develop, and they develop in many people because they work. They do, in fact, help us manage emotional states that we don't yet have the tools to navigate. And when you remove one coping strategy, your system is going to trade in for another one, most likely. Unless it's going to trade in for another one, unless you can learn the skills of interruption and mindfulness so that you don't keep jumping from one coping mechanism to another, one kind of urgent and semi-destructive coping mechanism to another, one that makes your life feel small and not as happy as you would like it to be, not as fulfilling as you would like it to be. This is actually the foundation of the work that I do with the people that I work with around food, because most people think that emotional overeating, binging, even control stuff with food is a food problem, but it's really not a food problem. It's a regulation problem, right? It's a nervous system that learned that there's only two speeds. You either numb the feeling or you control the behavior. Those are the two speeds. Alcohol was one way of regulating, and then food became another way of regulating. But the deeper work isn't about removing substances or forcing discipline. It's about building the capacity to regulate internally, right? To feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them, to eat without needing food, to soothe your emotional state, to trust yourself without needing rules. And again, I'm speaking about food here. I do think for many people, complete abstination from alcohol is necessary. So this is why my definition of sobriety is different, right? I redefine sobriety in my movement on the website, if you haven't seen that yet. And this is the foundation. Creating this capacity to regulate internally is the foundation of the sober eating sequence, right? It's not about dieting. It's not about bullying yourself through cravings. It's about teaching your nervous system a new relationship with regulation. Because when that internal stability develops, food becomes something that enhances your life without feeling like it controls your emotional state 24/7, right? Compulsion energy stops being intense. Your system no longer needs food to do the emotional calibrating, the emotional work for you. And again, if you're somebody who is experiencing this sort of transference of a dynamic between alcohol and food, your system no longer needs food or alcohol to do the emotional work for it. So if you're sober or newly sober, or you're thinking about getting sober, I'm happy you're listening to this. But if you are currently sober and you are experiencing this, you're noticing that food has become like a big thing in your brain, I want you to know you're 100% not alone. This isn't a failure. Your system just lost its primary coping tool that probably it was consistently leveraging for day in, day out for, years, months, decades maybe. And it's just trying to adapt. And this is just a part of your humanity, your humanness. And you are going through one of the biggest internal transitions a person can make, going from somebody who was not sober to living as someone who is sober from alcohol, while building the new infrastructure inside of you so that you can live a fulfilling life that receives amazing things and is present and is happy and has all of this ability to process and feel so many different textures and flavors of life. And if we talked about this more openly, I think it would remove so much shame from this experience of people who are going from being sober with alcohol to maybe struggling with food. I think if we did talk about this, which is one of the reasons I was excited to talk about this today, is that it does kind of take away some of that shame, because shame is what keeps people stuck. And silence is what keeps people isolated. And if this is something you're navigating right now, you are 100% not the only one. Okay? You are not the only one. And with that, I do want to ask you to definitely, in service of helping other people find this podcast, it would be so great if you did leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple, subscribe to us on YouTube so that the algorithm can see that these conversations we're having on this podcast is in service of helping people and push it out to more people that are potentially struggling in isolation. So if you could do that, that would be amazing. That would be lovely. That's it for me today. Until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.